Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be recommending some thrillers, and in particular I'm going to be recommending some thrillers that have twists that I didn't see coming, and so you might also not see them come in, but if you do then you're a lot smarter than I am. I know that some people say that if you say a book has a twist, then that would be a spoiler, and I do agree with certain genres. However, when it comes to thrillers, I personally like to know beforehand if it does have a twist, because I like twisty thrillers. Even though I know that not every thriller does have a twist, twisty thrillers are my favourite. And actually, if I see someone giving a book review and they say, this book has a twist that I did not see come in, then guaranteed I am going to want to read that. So if you're like me and you like thrillers that do have a lot of twists and turns, then hopefully you'll find some good recommendations through this video. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what the twists actually are because I'm not a dickhead. And I'm also going to be as vague as I can be in terms of I'm not going to tell you whether there's one big twist or several smaller twists, if that makes sense. But if you do have any recommendations for me of thrillers that you really enjoyed that have amazing twists, then please let me know in the comments, because I'm always on the lookout for a book that is going to surprise me. But the first book I'm going to recommend is The Heatwave by Katerina. So this came out last year, I think it was, and it came out around the same time as another book that was also called The Heatwave, but the one that I'm talking about is The Heatwave by Katerina. I don't own a physical copy, so I will put a picture on the screen here so you can double check that I'm talking about the same book, if that makes sense. But this follows a woman who is watching the news one day when she sees this article come on, this story that's talking about a girl in a seaside town that has gone missing, and straight away she recognises the name of this town because it's the town where she grew up and where, when she was a teenager, another girl went missing, and she knew more than she let on, but she ran away and never looked back. However, seeing this story on the news, she starts to think maybe they're connected, and so she decides to go back to her hometown to confront what happened back then. This is a really difficult one because up until a certain point I was enjoying this book, but it was just fine. And then it hit a certain point and it just completely surprised me. And I think that actually, if you're looking to get into thrillers, then this could be a really good book to start with, because even though it does have some common thriller tropes, like, you know, the whole woman going back to her hometown to confront her past, so that is quite a common trope that you see in thrillers. However, I think it puts a really unique spin on it. And like I said, I read a lot of thrillers and I did not see the ending to this book come in, and the tension and just the way that it concluded, I think, was really done well. The next book on my list is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. So this book is written in a very unique way, I think, because it follows a woman who is in prison. You learn that in the very first chapter, and she's writing to a lawyer from prison begging for help, basically, because she says that she is guilty of something, but she's not guilty of what they have accused her of. And then the book basically flicks back in time because this woman is telling her story and the events that led up to her being in prison, and how she accepted this job working as a nanny for this family who live in this beautiful house, this smart home in the Scottish Highlands, and the job seemed too good to be true. And as we all know, quite often when it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So yeah, when she arrives at this house, things start to happen, and the kids that she's meant to be looking after aren't quite the angels that she was led to believe they would be. And it's one of those tropes, those situations where you're not sure, is the house haunted? Is there something supernatural going on? Or is there a much more simpler explanation? This book was so creepy, and the atmosphere was 10 out of 10. I can't remember the last time actually that I read a thriller that actually made me scared. And it's the kind of book where you probably don't want to read it when you're alone in the house or late at night, because it was really creepy. I'm actually pretty sure that I finished this in a day, because once I got into it, it is quite a slow build up, I would say, but once I got into it, I had to know what was going to happen. Like, I couldn't put it down, and it keeps you guessing right up until the last page, like literally the last page. And the ending, I think some people would love. I loved the ending, just like, so you know. I know that some people didn't like the ending, and I can see why, and I think it is a bit like Marmite in that you will love it or hate it, but I did not see the ending coming. And so if you are interested in a book like that, that is gonna have you on the edge of your seat for the whole book right up until the very end, then I would recommend this one. Next on my list is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, and this follows a woman who I believe her name is Jules, if I'm remembering correctly, and she's in a bit of a desperate situation. You learn at the start of the book. So she's just found out that her boyfriend has been cheating on her, so she's homeless and she's living on her friend's couch, and she applies for this job as an apartment sitter. So the book is set in New York, and there's this beautiful grand old building that's home to a lot of celebrities, and a lot of famous people live there basically, and this building is hiring apartment sitters, so people that will live in the empty apartments for a few months, and they'll get a shit ton of money basically for doing it. And so she basically accepts this job because it seems too good to be true, and we all know, as I have said already in this video, that if a situation seems too good to be true, then it probably is, because on her first day she meets another apartment sitter, and this other apartment sitter tells her that there's something not quite right with what's going on in this building, and Jules is like, nah, you're paranoid, like there's it's all fine, I've just got to stay here for my 3 months and then I'm going to pocket the money and I'm going to go. But then the next day she finds out that this apartment sitter friend that she's made is now missing, and so Jules starts to investigate what is going on, because it seems like other apartment sitters in this building are also going missing. I raced through this book. I think it's quite short as well, which is probably why I'm pretty sure I finished it in a day, because once you get into it, it's really, I don't know whether I would say that it's fast paced, but it's very absorbing, and I was just really interested in finding out what the hell was going on in this apartment. And looking back, was the clues there? I don't know. Looking back, I feel like I should have guessed what was going on, but I couldn't. One thing I will say about this book though is that the main character was a little frustrating, and the decisions that she made weren't always the decisions that I would make or I would have made in that situation. However, because she was in this really desperate situation where she was literally homeless and she had nowhere else to go, I was able to overlook certain things. But yeah, otherwise I gave this book 5 stars, and I have read one of Riley Sager's other books, Home Before Dark, and I gave that 5 stars too. So I really want to go back and read some of their other books, and they also have a new book coming out this summer, which I'm also really excited for. I've actually been approved for an arc of it through NetGalley, so hopefully it's one that I can get around to soon. Next on my list is Watch Her Fall by Erin Kelly, and this is a really interesting book because it surprised me how much I enjoyed this book. I actually read an advanced copy through NetGalley. It came out earlier this year, so I haven't seen many people talking about it, but I really liked how unique this story was. It starts off by following a woman called Ava, who is the daughter of the director of this Russian ballet school in London, and she's just been given the lead role in the production of Swan Lake, which is a role that most dancers would absolutely kill for. And throughout the first section of the book, you're following Ava as she begins to feel like someone may be out to get her and someone is waiting to watch her fall, hence the title. Then in the middle of the book, I was a little bit confused because it seemed to be going off in this completely random direction. However, the way that all the threads started to come together, I really loved. And even though it did have a slower build up, and it was slow throughout the book, I would say it is a slower paced thriller, but it was the kind of thriller that I couldn't put it down because I was so invested in the story and wanting to learn what was going on with these characters. And I also loved that even though I don't know anything about ballet, it made me feel like I was being absorbed into this ballet school and that I was there and I could feel the tension and the political undertones and everything that was going on with the working of this ballet company. I thought that was done really well. Next on my list is The One by John Mars, and this has recently been adapted into a TV show by Netflix. However, I would say that they are very different, the book and the TV show, because even though they have the same concept, the characters, from what I remember, and the general plot is completely different. So this book is set around 10 years in the future, where this company have come up with a way of testing people to find soulmates. So essentially you send off a swab of your DNA and this company will enter it into their database, and if your soulmate has also sent off a swab of their DNA, then they'll match you and they'll put you in touch. And so it's completely changed the way that modern dating is. And the book follows 5 different characters who have all just received an email to say that their match has been found. And so the 5 storylines are very different, and they each look at a different way that this discovery has changed society. If you like the TV show Black Mirror, then I would really recommend this because it gave me that very similar vibe. It's very, very dark in places, I will say. So if you're not okay with graphic violence, then this is probably not the book for you. The chapters are quite short, and even though it's a relatively long book from what I can remember, I read it quite quickly because I am not joking when I say that there's a cliffhanger at the end of every single chapter, and so I could not put it down. Next on my list is No Exit by Taylor Adams. So this follows a woman called Darby who is driving home from college to visit her mom in hospital, and as she's driving through the mountains, she gets stuck in this snowstorm. There's basically a blizzard outside, and so she has to pull over into this rest stop, and at this rest stop there are several people there, and she pops in and says hi, but then she goes outside with her phone to try and get signal to make a phone call, and as she's wandering around the car park, she notices this handprint in the back door of a van, and as she investigates, she finds that there's a child locked in a cage in the back of this van, and so she starts to suspect that there's a child abductor at this rest stop, and so the book follows her as she tries to survive the night, basically, because the emergency services have said that they can't come out to them until probably the morning. This is one of those thrillers where you really have to suspend disbelief because some of the stuff that happens in it is not that believable, but I still had a great time reading it, I'm not gonna lie. And I think that if you're looking for a fast-paced thriller with lots of action and you're okay with a bit of blood and gore, then I think that this was really good and I would recommend it. I read it in one sitting because I was reading it for a book club, and I can remember the discussion for the book club was on the Sunday, and so I started on the Saturday thinking I'm not going to finish this in time, but I did, and I enjoyed it. Next on my list is a book that I personally didn't love, but it is really popular and I know a lot of people love this book, and actually when I think back on it, I did think that the twists were done well, so I would still recommend it, but that is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. So the story takes place on this island where this wedding is about to happen, and it's a very exclusive wedding because the bride is a magazine editor of this really popular magazine, and the groom is a TV presenter, if I'm remembering correctly. And at the very start of the book, you learn that someone has died at the wedding reception, but you don't know who. And so then the book flicks back to the day before, and you follow all these different characters and you see the events that lead up to this, and you're trying to work out throughout the book not only who the murderer is, but also who has actually died. And I think that was where I didn't personally love this book because I didn't like any of the characters, and usually I am a very plot-driven reader anyway when it comes to thrillers, but because the whole point of this book is that you're trying to work out who died, and I didn't care who died. However, when it was revealed, I did think that the way the story fit together was quite clever, and there were certain things that I did not see coming. I also really love books that have that isolated setting, and the atmosphere in this book I did think was done very well. I've heard a few people compare it to Agatha Christie's books, and I've never read an Agatha Christie book, so I can't say how accurate that is, but I know that a lot of people who have read this have compared the two, so maybe if you like Agatha Christie, then you would also like this book. Also, if you don't mind reading about rich people who are just awful, then I think that you would enjoy this as well. There's a lot of drama, and I think that it started to edge into too much for me, but I know that some people absolutely love that, and sometimes I do love it, to be fair. Yeah, I think that if you like rich people drama, then you would enjoy this book too. So those are all the standalone books on my list, and then I wanted to mention a couple of other book series that I really enjoy purely because they are so twisty, and the first is the D.I. Adam Fawley series by Cara Hunter. The first book in this series is Close to Home, and it follows a child who has gone missing, basically. So throughout this series, you're following this team of detectives as they investigate these different crimes. So in the first book, they're investigating after these parents have reported their child is missing, and they had a party basically, and they noticed at the end of the night as the guests were leaving that their child wasn't there. And so it sounds very generic, I know, but honestly, this book series in general is so twisty, and there are so many turns. I read the first 4 books in this series in the space of a week, because I read the first book and then I thought, okay, wow, that was amazing. And then I had to pick up the next book and then the next book. And I think that still to this day, the 4th book in the series is my favourite. You could technically read them all as standalones, but I think that you do get more from reading them in order, because you are following the same team of detectives, and so you do get to know them as the series goes on. So yeah, I would really recommend that one if you like crime thrillers. Another book series that I haven't completed, I've read books 4 and 5 because it's another series where you don't have to read the books in order, they do work as standalones, but that is the Eddie Flynn series by Steve Cavanagh. I've mentioned his books on my channel quite a lot because I really love them. So basically in this series you're following a lawyer called Eddie Flynn, who used to be a con artist, but now obviously he works as a lawyer, and so you're following a different case that he's working on in each book. The first book in this series that I read was 13, which I think is the 4th book, and that basically, the whole tagline behind that book, which honestly is what sold it to me, the tagline is, the serial killer isn't on trial, they're on the jury. So it follows a serial killer who manages to worm their way onto the jury of the trial of someone who is on trial for the murder that they committed. I don't know if I've explained that very well, but the other book in this series that I've read, which I read earlier this year, I think I read it in January, and that was 50/50, and that follows 2 sisters who have both accused each other of murdering their father, and so you suspect that one of them has done it, but you don't know who, and so Eddie Flynn is representing one of the sisters, and honestly, the way that I went back and forth throughout this book was just, yeah, I thought it was done really well, and I thought it was so well written in the way that either of those sisters could have been the murderer, but you don't know who it is, and so it was really fun trying to work out, even though it was literally impossible. I could not work out who it was. I do actually have the first book in this series and the second book maybe on my Kindle. I really want to go back and read them and read the series in order, even though I have heard that the earlier books in this series aren't as good, and 13 is where it really gets going. But if there are any more books in the series, which I think there will be, then I will definitely be reading them, because I think I gave 13 and 50/50 both 5 stars. 13 in particular, I stayed awake until 4 o'clock in the morning to finish that book because I kept trying to sleep and I couldn't fall asleep because my mind was just going and like, oh, but what is happening? What's going to happen? So I actually can't really remember how that book ends because I was literally reading it like a zombie, trying to like stay awake, but also not being able to sleep, if that makes sense. But yeah, those are all the books that I would recommend if you are looking for thrillers that have some good twists and turns. As I said, let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for me. And yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you next time. Bye.